The first topic in the preliminary biology series is 8.2, a local ecosystem. As this is the first topic, I will briefly go over the structure of the New South Wales biology syllabus. The syllabus begins with the topic name at the top, the contextual outline, which tells you what the topic will be about, assumed knowledge, and then the dot points. So the dot points are broken into 3 different columns, 1, 2, and 3. The first column is what we call the prescribed focus area. The second column are the knowledge and understanding dot points. And the third column are any skills that you will be practicing, so practicals or secondary source investigations. Now, the prescribed focus area links all of these dot points together under a particular theme or topic. So columns 2 and 3 relate to each other in terms of a particular biology learning area. The first focus area is the distribution, diversity, and numbers of plants and animals found in ecosystems are determined by biotic and abiotic factors. Now I've underlined the keywords that will help you to understand what you will be learning about through the first group of dot points. So the first word, distribution, refers to the area where an organism is found. For example, the common wombat is distributed throughout southeast mainland Australia and throughout Tasmania. The next word, diversity, refers to variation or differences between or within species. So, for example, you could say there is variation or diversity within and between species of fungi. The next key word underlined is ecosystems. So this refers to a community of living organisms as well as the non-living parts of the environment. So what do we mean by the non-living parts of the environment? Well, for example, this can include air and water. The next word is a very important word to understand as part of this course. So the word biotic. The Greek root word for bio means life or living. So the word biotic refers to the living parts of the environment. Now, what do we mean by the living parts? Well, that can include living organisms, such as prey, predators, and also the competitors in the environment. So the next word, abiotic, has the opposite meaning to biotic. So we're referring to the non-living components of the environment. For example, the water availability, the oxygen availability, light intensity, temperature, the soil characteristics, pH, which is a measure of acidity levels, and wind exposure. Now, abiotic factors can be measured. So, for example, you can measure temperature using a thermometer, and pH can be measured with indicators or a pH meter and probe. So we will now move on to the first dot point under this focus area to compare the abiotic characteristics of aquatic and terrestrial environments. Now the verb in this dot point is compare. So if we refer to the Board of Studies glossary of key verbs, compare means to show how things are similar or different. One of the best ways to do this is to construct a table which will show the similarities and differences between abiotic, so the non-living factors, in aquatic, water environments, and terrestrial, land environments. The first abiotic factor to compare is viscosity, which is a measure of how difficult it is for a fluid to flow. So in other words, the stickiness of a fluid. So we'll add viscosity to our comparison table. Now the viscosity of an aquatic environment is much greater than on a terrestrial environment. So in other words, it is much more difficult to move through water than it is to move through air on land. So one way that aquatic organisms have evolved to withstand the high viscosity of water is to have a body shape that has the least resistance to movement through water. So this is usually a long, narrow shape, which we call a streamlined body shape. Because of the low viscosity on land, terrestrial organisms do not need this streamlined shape. The next abiotic factor to compare is buoyancy, which is a measure of a substance's ability to support or to hold an object, so its flotation ability. Now, in an aquatic environment, the water is very buoyant and can easily support the organisms. However, the buoyancy on land is much less, and therefore organisms need to provide their own upward support. So our body's skeleton provides support. It gives us shape, helps us to stand and move around. For plants, a woody tissue called lignin provides structural support, allowing the plants to grow. Whales, which live in aquatic environments, can grow to huge sizes because the water supports their shape. However, if whales are beached on land, they are often stranded and die because the air is unable to support them. Temperature can also be compared between the two environments. In an aquatic environment, there is less temperature variation compared to a terrestrial environment. So this means that the temperature in water remains relatively stable. The temperature variation on land is much greater and can vary enormously within a short time. So for example, in desert regions, temperature can reach up to 45 degrees Celsius during the day and drop to as low as minus 18 degrees Celsius at night. Availability of gases refers to the concentration of gases, such as carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now, these gases are found in the atmosphere and in water. Organisms use oxygen for respiration, which is the process by which cells release energy. Carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis, where plants convert light energy into chemical energy called glucose, which fuels their activities. In water, oxygen is much less available than on land. As the water becomes deeper, or as the temperature increases, the availability of these gases decreases in the water. The concentration of these gases is greater on land. However, their availability decreases with altitude. So in other words, the concentration of these gases at the top of a mountain would be much less than lower in the atmosphere. The next abiotic factor is water availability. In terrestrial environments, water is scarce, and organisms have adaptations to help them to conserve water and to survive. However, aquatic organisms don't have any issues with water supply, but they do need to deal with the balance between salt and water. So if we look at fish living in freshwater and saltwater environments, they have different mechanisms to regulate the salt and water balance in their bodies. So on the left-hand side, this fish is living in a saltwater environment. The dots represent the salt within the water. The fish that I've drawn on the right-hand side lives in a freshwater environment. The way that these fish regulate the salt and water moving into and out of their bodies is through a process called osmosis, where water moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration of water. For saltwater fish, the water concentration within their bodies is much higher than the water concentration of their surroundings. So through osmosis, water will move out of the fish to the saltier surroundings. Now, this movement of water can cause the fish to dehydrate. So to prevent this, saltwater fish need to drink much seawater. For freshwater fish, the salt levels in their body fluids are higher compared to their surrounding water. So through osmosis, where water moves from an area of high concentration to low concentration of water, the water will move into the fish. Because of this, freshwater fish produce large amounts of dilute urine to excrete the water. The next abiotic factor is light penetration, which is the availability of light in the environment. So in aquatic environments, there is less light available than in terrestrial environments. And with increased depth of water, light availability also decreases. On land, light is freely available, except in highly dense areas such as forests and rainforests, or areas such as caves. Pressure also varies between aquatic and terrestrial environments. So in aquatic environments, the water pressure increases with depth. So the deeper the water, the higher the pressure. On land, the pressure decreases with height. So the higher the altitude, for example on a mountain, the lower the pressure. Now interestingly, this can affect gas exchange within the body, which causes what we call altitude sickness due to the lack of oxygen. So people on the top of a mountain might laugh, show poor judgment, and experience nausea. The final abiotic factor that we will compare is the availability of ions in an environment. So ions are charged particles that are dissolved in water. So for example, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Now in aquatic environments, ions are dissolved in the water and are therefore freely available to the organisms. On land, ions can be found in soil, food, and in areas with water. That concludes the first video in the preliminary biology series. During the next video, we will look at factors which determine the distribution and abundance of species, and also techniques which are used to make population estimates of species.